Welcome to Right on the Edge. My name is Derek, and after I saw that video the other day about Gen Z missing a time they're never part of, um, the same guy Jerry, also the creator of that other video, Philosophy, he left a really nice comment. I appreciate that, brother. Hopefully, hopefully I can spiral this into something so I can fire my boss. You know what I mean? On that note, like and subscribe. But anyway, I'm going to respond to another video in the same vein called Frutiger Aero, Gen Z's Make-Believe Nostalgia. Now, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but hopefully in this video, they will tell me how to pronounce it right. And on that note, let's push play, and we'll see this dude's ad, I guess. So, let's get right into it.
This video was brought to you by Surfshark. Hello, friends. My name is Jay.
That was a great ad. 10 out of 10. Lasted 2 seconds.
So, the people of my generation, the millennials, have been enjoying quite the
No way. No way. Okay, yeah.
toasty bath in the warm water of our own nostalgia lately. Not only have we forced Hollywood to reboot all of the beloved TV shows of our youth and cajoled the video game industry into remaking every game we ever played, we have even invented...
Hey, what can I say? We're doing good, but to be fair to us, they fucked up a lot of those things. They fucked them up a lot.
Multiple different genres of music that exist for the sole purpose of reminding us what it felt like going shopping with our parents. Like, seriously, the other day I learned about barber beats, a style of music that is apparently supposed to evoke memories of going to the barber shop in the 90s.
I had no idea about this. I'll probably never know about this. I keep learning more and more things.
Not to be confused with mall soft, which is the genre that is supposed to evoke memories of going to the mall, or clown wave, which is the kind that is supposed to remind you of going to McDonald's. So
What? Why? I'm so confused.
amid all of this, it was perhaps inevitable that sooner or later the Zoomer generation would get jealous. I mean, millennial nostalgia can be a little self-indulgent and corny, but there's no denying it's created some...
Yeah, let's just you know, it's just better than yours, you know? Like, let's just say it. You know, this guy knows, and I know. Now you know.
Pretty cool stuff
I'm
as
just
well.
kidding.
At the moment, the Zoomers are really working hard trying to make nostalgia for something called Frutiger Aero a thing. This is basically supposed to be the Gen Z equivalent of that late 80s, early 90s design sensibility that my generation has been having so much fun with. YouTube is currently full of
That's crazy.
all sorts of
Frutiger
Aero videos from the under 30 video essay crowd, often expressing a great deal of self-satisfaction that they've stumbled onto something really important here. Finally, a nostalgic cult of Gen Z's very own.
Frutiger
Good job, man.
Aero, the up-and-coming term for the aesthetic we've been seeing for almost decades now.
Frutiger Aero may just seem like that silly, bubbly Windows theme from all those years back, but there's so much more to it than that.
Really? Is there? That's a great game. I played that game.
Shaped people's childhoods, even if they didn't know it. It inspired people. It was an
I played all those games.
amazing look. It got people looking and talking.
They now represent for me a kind of hazy nostalgia, a glimpse into a time when the world was racing through the digital age with a hopeful enthusiasm.
It was Frutiger Aero that helped ease us into this new reality.
Man, this is some real rose-tinted glasses, but hey, I'm for it.
Now, I gotta say, I have some mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I am a pretty
Me too. No boot this.
big fan of nostalgia in general, and it is cool to see the kids getting into it. As someone who is turning 40 this year, it is kind of interesting to witness people younger than yourself start to develop a sense of nostalgia for the past. It provides a fresh perspective for reflecting on eras of your own life.
Yeah. It kind of has hopefully making me mature a little bit.
But on the other hand, Frutiger Aero is such a terrible foundation for Gen Z to be building their...
What a terrible name. That's what I'm gonna say. What a terrible name. No branding.
nostalgic project on, and in my opinion reflects a kind of weird narrowness of thought and ambition that Zoomers have an unfortunate tendency to fall into. What I mean by
Wow. That was not insulting at all.
this is that I have noticed for a while now that a lot of Zoomer-aged people, at least online, have this obsessive desire to name and sort and categorize everything as specifically as possible.
Let's not pretend like we didn't do the same thing. Let's not pretend like we didn't do the same thing, buddy.
If something doesn't have a name and a precise definition that can be filed away on some
We did the same thing. This is like human nature. We did the same thing.
specialized wiki somewhere, then it doesn't truly exist and isn't worth anything. A fellow millennial friend of mine described this as the Gen Z tendency to make everything a Pokemon. And basically,
It's pretty good. That's pretty good, but I'm gonna go back to let's not pretend like we didn't. We maybe just weren't as bad about it.
Zoomer nostalgia around Frutiger Aero is such a great example of this tendency because they have taken a perfectly good concept, which is nostalgia for the vibes of the first 2 decades of the 21st century, and linked it to this exotic and unintuitive pseudo-academic
That name is terrible.
term. And all that does is turn what should be a broad and accessible nostalgic project into an exercise in gatekeeping and fussiness over precise definitions and examples. I'm not even going to bother
I will agree with that. I will agree with that.
explaining what the name Frutiger Aero even means, because the mere fact that the name even requires an explanation is an acknowledgement of its failure, in my opinion. But basically, Frutiger
Wow.
Aero is a term that somebody came up with to describe this sort of aesthetic. This is the introductory photo to the concept that they almost always use, in fact. The idea is that we are describing a visual style that is supposed to combine natural things like water and fish with high-tech things to create a bright and pleasant vibe, along with certain other design flourishes like lots of gradients and turquoise colored things. The problem
We do love our turquoise, don't we? You got some in the background.
arises, however, in that some of the Zoomer thought leaders are trying to broaden the definition of Frutiger Aero to encompass basically everything that defined material culture in the 2000s and early 2010s, which, like I said, then just invites other Zoomers to argue endlessly about whether, say, Super Monkey Ball 2 is actually Frutiger Aero as opposed to Y2K or Cyber Paradisism or Pool Core or any of the other untold dozens and dozens of Pokemon-esque hyper-precise
That's so many. That's so lot.
niche microaesthetics found on the aesthetics wiki. So Zoomers, I implore you, just give this up. Just say you're nostalgic about the early 21st century and leave it at that. If you're nostalgic about 2000s era shopping malls, just say you're nostalgic about 2000s era shopping
Bro, you say a boot so hard, it's obvious you're Canadian. They're so crazy. Not even judging you. Good job.
malls. If you're nostalgic about 2000s era computer interface
I do miss those menus a little bit.
menus, just say you're nostalgic about 2000s era computer interface menus. You don't have to get bogged down trying to express your sentimentality through these
No. An ad.
jargon
Whatever will I do?
nonsense terms that no sane person knows. But that said, let us now talk about the one truth that I do think the whole Frutiger Aero Zoomer discourse is correct in noticing. It is objectively true that a lot
I'm just gonna pause for a second. Sorry about that. I had to go refill my snackies and think about this a little bit. I still love the opinion that we did the same to a lesser extent.
of visual design in the first decades of the 21st century were defined by a ton of naturalistic imagery, futurism, and an abundance of shadows, gradients, lens flares, and all the rest of it. And I think that's a very important thing to call attention to, because in many ways it visually symbolizes
It's also, to be fair, these were like emerging technologies of our time. And the technology was getting better at such a fast rate that they wanted to always showcase how it was getting better and why.
the end of the 20th century and the sharp cultural break we made with the long post-war era as the new millennium dawned. But before we get into any of that, let us just hear a quick word from today's video sponsor, Surfshark.
No.
Hello, friends. So you might think that living here, VPN apps that you can use in today's, like the government of months free with a 1-year subscription. And do not forget that Surfshark also has practice safe surfing. Okay,
there we go.
So why did so much of the developed world embrace this particular visual design sensibility so wholeheartedly around the turn of the millennium? Well, in a word, computers.
Yep. The technology finally arrived.
In the 1990s, computer-generated graphics abruptly got a lot better due to the culmination of all sorts of advancements in microchip processing technology that made computers much faster and thus able to run much more complicated graphic design programs. New forms
Also, monitors got a lot better. So different shaders and color. Like, we went from 16-bit colors, the 32-bit colors, the 64-bit colors, all within the space of a few years.
Forms of data storage, chiefly CD-ROMs, likewise made it much easier to sell software to the public that was capable of making use of these new elaborately designed visuals. And as a result, our culture went through a phase beginning in the mid-90s, where an obsession with good graphics overwhelmingly defined the visual tastes of the next couple of decades. As someone who lived through it, I can assure you that the 90s revolution in computer processing power was a subject of enormous public delight and excitement. And as a result, once it became possible to produce computer-generated imagery with a level of realism previously unseen, companies of all sorts were constantly straining to impress customers by making use of this technology.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Everybody was trying to one-up each other.
To stick next generation computer generated graphics and absolutely everything. It was all a very conscious effort to wow people by showing them how far computer generated visuals had come in such a short time. The excessive use of
It's also why you get people like me who, even though I do like good graphics in the game and everything, anymore, I would rather play like a great pixel game than a game with great graphics. For instance, my favorite time-wasting game is Stardew Valley, and I haven't been able to play it for a while because my Switch is stuck in my luggage. You know?
color, texture, and lighting was intended to contrast with the computer graphics of the past, which were defined by limited palettes and flat, two-dimensional looking pictures. The focus on depicting nature, likewise, was supposed to emphasize this idea that post-90s computers could produce images that were...
I remember that image and how great I thought it looked at the time.
realistic, when earlier computer graphics were mostly known for being abstract and stylized. The growth of this whole phenomenon was slow but steady, and eventually reached a sort of climax in the age that the Zoomers grew up in and are having so much fun reminiscing about today. But because it is ultimately a very large and long story, I think other generations can relate to it a lot as well. When I was 10, a Super Nintendo game called Donkey Kong Country came out, and it was my first introduction to this new...
I love that game. I loved it so much. I loved it so much. But that was his system as an older millennial. For me, the system that would really take over the majority of my life, even though I played Super Nintendo, and we had a Super Nintendo for several years, it was the 64 for me. I got one of those in 1999. It was purple and see-through, and it was awesome.
Age of aesthetics. Donkey Kong Country was the first Nintendo game to make use of what I feel we now call CGI style graphics with three-dimensional rendered characters. The game took place in a jungle world, which allowed the creators to really show off the capacities of next generation computer graphics in what would become a very stereotypical way, with realistic looking trees and coral reefs and sunsets and that sort of thing. In those days, there was a lot of rivalry.
It was also really good in that one because they actually used a blend of digital imagery and real imagery in that game, I believe.
Between Nintendo and Sega. So a few months later, Sega released their CGI game called Vector Man. And I remember it being scorned for the fact that, unlike Donkey Kong, it didn't take place in nature and thus was that much less visually impressive. This was also a criticism.
I wasn't old enough to know that, but that makes sense that people would do that. Aren't we always just in this cycle of who's better than who?
Made of Pixar's Toy Story, which came out around the same time, though obviously very beloved and technologically revolutionary.
Did that really come out in 2005? Hold up a second. Holy shit. It did. I could have sworn that came out in like 98 or something. Shows what I know.
As the first full-length CGI feature film, it was also a bit less visually ambitious than it could have been, since it was about plastic toys rather than nature things. Pixar's follow.
Okay. I don't know anybody that thinks that. Toy Story was one of the greatest movies of that time. I mean, it hasn't aged the best because things have been advanced, but like, I don't know a single person that hated Toy Story.
Follow-up film, however.
Students across Washington receive an education that fits their style at
goodness.
Insight School of Washington.
A Bug's Life was all about nature, and although mostly forgotten today, was considered at the time even more
I love that game. I mean, that game. I love that show too.
groundbreaking than Toy Story. Once ordinary desktop
I also liked the movie Ants around the same time.
computers started using CDs, I remember there was a real explosion in nature graphics everywhere too, even in very mundane middle-class contexts. I have a particularly vivid memory of being captivated by an aquarium screensaver
Me too. Me too. We all used it.
on one of the computers in my high school office. And of course, everybody in those days would be super proud of having a high-resolution digital photograph as their desktop wallpaper, usually of the beach, but sometimes
Yeah, that's true too.
the mountains or a nice rolling hill. There was this website called
Nice Rolling Hill was it. That's peak.
Digital Blasphemy that I was quite fond of as a teenager. And it would always have these really cool CGI wallpapers featuring scenes of nature stuff, sometimes mixed with future stuff. I remember I had this one called Arbor Day on my bedroom computer for a long time, later replaced by this one of dolphins swimming to an underwater city.
Wow, you got me beat, man. I've never seen either of those. That's pretty cool.
Along with nature, futuristic stuff was probably the most popular thing to depict with CGI in
No, that's true.
this era. Sometimes this was done to fulfill the long-standing expectation that anything involving computers had to be sci-fi in its sensibilities, and sometimes it was just done to conceal the fact
Sometimes I still think so. I'm still guilty of using those cool images and just like being like, wow, that's nice. And nature too, for that matter.
that late 90s, early 2000s computer graphics still weren't that great, so it was sometimes easier to use CGI to depict things that were supposed to look a bit fantastical and thus invite less criticism. This was around the time that the concept of the uncanny valley started to go mainstream, which is basically the idea that the harder something tries to look realistic, the more critical of it we become. A good example of threading this particular needle.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that's when that started to become more talked about. The more you know, because I didn't hear about that till a few years ago, and I always wondered, why do humans have that? You know, like, are we, you know what I mean?
Was the Canadian cartoon Reboot, which ran from 1994 to 1998, and I believe was the first ever fully CGI TV show. It took place in this fantasy world.
Wow. I remember this, but not well. Which means it was probably terrible.
That was supposed to be literally inside of a computer, which allowed the show to occupy this sort of nebulous aesthetic space where it was both realistic and artificial at the same time. That was a sweet spot that would define the ambition of a lot of computer graphics until quite recently. 1995 marked the dawn of a new generation of video games on this continent, with the release of the PlayStation 1, followed by the N64, and then the Sega Dreamcast, all of which boasted
Played them all. Sega Dreamcast was very good. Nintendo was just better at marketing. You know?
state-of-the-art, fully CGI graphics, and they too would make a big show of their graphical ability to depict both futuristic and naturalistic things. Since I was a real firm Nintendo partisan back then,
Hey, You and me, bro. Right here, together.
I only played N64 games, and I remember
My uncle had a PS1, which at the time I believe was a little bit more expensive. And I remember I put hours into Crash Bandicoot. Also, one of my mom's friend had a PlayStation, and insert the first nightmares I ever had after playing Resident Evil.
Pilot Wings and Wave Race really being held up as games whose graphics depicted just how realistically digital water and lighting could be rendered in this exciting new age. But even Lil JJ had to admit that that scene where Sonic ran away from the killer whale was pretty impressive. Anyway, things continued in this direction for a while as computer technology got better and
He was probably like, yeah, that's cool, but, you know, Donkey Kong 64.
better. Companies would cram more and more show-offy computer-generated visual effects into everything. Nothing was ever allowed to be simple or abstract. Food packages, album covers, TV commercials, office software, even your phone became full of 3D-looking CGI things packed full of details. And the problem that started to emerge by the dawn of the 2010s was that computer-generated graphics were beginning to get a little unappealing in just how overproduced they were.
I'm glad I'm not alone in this. I'm glad I'm not alone in this. Remember I said, like, we're just get kind of like, yeah, it's kind of overdone, bro. We're kind of tired of it.
Everything was too shiny, too glowy, too smooth, too colorful, too detailed, too realistic, which ironically started to make everything look too fake. This then generated a backlash, as all things that go too far inevitably do. And today we are living in the aftermath of that, an era where flat and minimalistic designs that hide rather than flaunt their
which is also, I think we're getting to a point where it's too much of this too. Like, there's never like a happy medium. But don't get me wrong, I love this style. So, you know, more power to me, right?
Computer generatedness are very much in fashion. The Zoomers came of age basically at the tail end of this decades-long phenomenon when overproduced, very gimmicky and flashy computer graphics were at their peak of cultural prominence. Gen Z's defining cultural experiences as kids were thus characterized by a lot of exposure to this sort of stuff, which they now often wrongly attribute to a bunch of discrete design trends like the so-called Frutiger Aero, rather than something.
Frutiger Aero is a terrible name, but I respect your ability to name what you want to. In the same way that people of my generation, you know, we had to name the fucking, ooh, what type of music is it? Oh, you're into rock? Well, what kind of rock? Is it postmodern rock? Is it urban rock? Is it metal? Is it death metal? Is it super ultra mega death metal rock emo screamo with an infusion of punk? You know, every generation does it, man. That's all I'm trying to say. It's like, it's kind of stupid.
Grander and more historically significant. Again, I don't want to undermine the degree that the kids did in fact grow up in an era of very distinct visual aesthetics. I'm just saying that I think it's an era that should be appreciated in full, as opposed to chopping it up into its component pieces and arguing about where to make the cuts. The other somewhat dubious aspect of the Zoomer project to make Frutiger Aero a thing is the degree that they really want their nostalgia for it to symbolize something about the present. I mean, I guess on some level that's always what nostalgia exists to do.
I was gonna say, I think honestly, I think we all do it. We really do. I know it's like hard to understand, right? Because we're past it. We're past it. We're at the age where we're past it. You know, we're over it. We went there, and now we're over it. We're done doing that. And now we're just trying to like take things as it is, go with the flow, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. You know what I mean? And you know, Gen Z is still in it, right? They're trying to make sense of the world still. That's what they're doing. And is it kind of stupid? Is it kind of cringe? Kind of cheesy? Is it? Is it? Yeah. Yeah, the answer is yes. Yes, it is. But that's okay. Now, I'll have the link to the full video below. I know there's only 4 minutes left, so it's like, why even wait? Well, you know, it's because I wanna generate traffic and for my 5 people to watch these things and send it on. But that's kind of my take on it. But it's Frutiger Aero is the name's not gonna work, guys. In fact, in about 15 years, probably you'll be like, what was that fucking thing we were talking about with all the bubbles and shit? Fruit arrow, fruit plane, what? And then your friends will be like, yeah, yeah. So my answer is don't stress out so much. You don't have to make it be about anything. Just enjoy it if you enjoy it.